In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I welcome you to this fourth of our catechism classes, which started from the first Sunday of Advent. Let me hope I'm not mistaken, because I had to start with the need to open up to this new opportunity that the church offers us in this liturgical year, to pick up again, to reactivate again the spiritual resources we have. That was the first catechism. It was more of a provocative catechism. The second one was also provocative, the one that talked about the need for preparation for Mass, that we do not go to have encounter without preparation, just as the seed that is sown in a very fertile ground. We need to prepare the way we prepare for everything. And from there, we went to the third catechism, in which, even from that second and the first already, there were many other things that were coming up that I said I will take up in any of the catechisms. I was thinking of maybe presenting the missal so that we use the missal since, but then one point came, since every time there's a rimandi, they will call it in Italian, like taking us back to picking up the Bible. So I had to do the third catechism, presenting basically study Bibles. I came with two, the HarperCollins Bible and the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible, two of them study Bibles. So presenting them, opening them up, and using the passage of James, the second reading of last Sunday, the third Sunday, where James was talking about patience, chapter 5, to show how the study Bible helps us to understand better the text, unlike we would have if we just read the text alone without those commentaries and the references. So when I came to YouTube, I saw a question that someone asked me. Since it is a question that needs some sitting down, needs some calming down to listen, to understand, and to approach, I decided to take this question as our fourth catechism, which, and then also I may be writing. So maybe if something comes up which needs to be written, I may write it. But first, let me read the question. The question says, I heard you talk about Protestant Bibles. I'm reading it as I saw it there. That contain also the same books that are contained in a Catholic Bible. I was presenting the HarperCollins Bible. What are the differences between these two? And how did these two sets of Bible come about? This is the question. So, how do we go now? Maybe we begin by saying that the word Bible is from Greek Biblia, which is the plural of biblion. So biblion is the singular of leaf. So Biblia is plural of books. So when we talk about Bible, we are talking about books. And immediately, as we are talking about books, a book that contains different books that came in different epochs, in different contexts. So maybe we're talking about different books. So since there are different books, it presents already the question. Let me explain again. There are different people that collected different books that were written in different epochs. So before the Bible, we can say, maybe historically, talking about, To mind comes like 5 different communities that read some or all, that read some of the books we have in the Bible. 5 different communities. Okay? So here, when let's go back to the first century, the time of Jesus Christ. In John chapter 4, Jesus was talking to a Samaritan woman, and they were saying, like, we worship here, you people worship here. We have the Samaritans who believed in, sorry for the, so the Samaritans, they believed only in the first books of the Bible, 5 books, the Torah, which also we call the Pentateuch, the books of Moses. So these are the first people that approached the Bible. Then we also have the Sadducees, okay? I think, the Sadducees. Also, during the time of Jesus, we have the Sadducees. So these two, for them, the authoritative book they had was the 5 books of Moses, which we know: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So, but among the different sects that we had at the time of Jesus, which included these Sadducees, the Samaritans are more of seen as heretics because they're disconnected for the mainstream Jews. So we hear every time of the Pharisees. So because this one is very important now. So for the Pharisees, even if we remember when Paul was having problem in Acts of the Apostles, between the Sadducees and the Sadducees do not believe in resurrection. For them, the authoritative book are only these 5 books of Moses. Just like the Samaritans. I'm coming historically. Then the Pharisees do not only regard the 5 books of Moses as authoritative, as inspired, they also regarded 2 other sections of books, which are the prophets. So apart from now I'm at the 3rd group, which are the prophets and writings. So these are the Pharisees, the 3rd group. From here now, we see how Christian denominations entered into the Old Testament. Because also when we come into the Christian different way of reading the Bible, I talked about like 5 communities. I've already mentioned, okay, yeah, even it might even be more. Okay, the Samaritans 5, the Sadducees 5, the Pentateuch, 2 of them. But these 2, we don't hear of them again after the 1st century, especially after the destruction of the temple in 70. Then we enter into Christians, where this is where things will begin to get interested because of the question that the person asked. So let's give it number 4. So now, for the Pharisees, okay, the official number of books, the Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, and the writings. Before Christians entered into reading this Old Testament, these are the books that the Pharisees regarded as inspired. And for these people, the order is like this: the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, which are divided into anterior, former, or if you can call it former, anterior and posterior prophets, according to their time. Anterior and posterior. Posterior prophets. Anterior are the formal prophets for Christians, these are historical books, even from the stories they narrate, we call them historical books. So here we have from Judges, from Joshua rather, yeah, from Joshua through Judges to Second Kings. So these are the former prophets that are called prophets for the Jews. And the prophets are nearer to the Torah, which is the core of the scripture. But then we see that for Christians, the prophets are nearer to the New Testament. They are prophesying the New Testament. We'll come to that. So from after this, we have the posterior prophets, which are the prophets that have their names. We have the major and minor. Not minor in a sense of lower in quality, but minor in terms of quantity, in terms of quantity. So here, the major prophets for these people are Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. These are the major prophets because of the quantity. Then the minor prophets are normally the 12 minor prophets, all these Habakkuk, Micah, and all of them. So Habakkuk and so on. And Hosea. Is it Hosea is Italian? Hosea, I think that's English. Hosea, yeah, let me not, I'm speaking English now. Okay. And so on, that the minor prophets. So the posterior, in terms of quantity, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and minor in terms of quantity, Habakkuk, Zachariah, all of them. We'll notice something, of course. Then you come to writings. Writings are more of poetic books like Psalms, like Job. Yeah. Even Daniel is part of writings for these people. First and Second Chronicles. The Chronicles, First and Second, and Nehemiah and Ezra. So all these ones are part of the writings, and other like Proverbs, other poetic books, Kohelet. So these are in the Hebrew Bible, because this question is a little bit complicated. Let's calm down so that we understand what I'm talking about. Because the time that the Hebrew Bible we have now, which is the Masoretic text, normally will in this, let's say MT, the Masoretic text, the vocalized Hebrew text, that is around 7, especially 8th century after Christ. Before this time, this will help us now to understand how Christian Bibles and Christian denominations came into the Hebrew Bible. Before this time already, because of also the Jews who were living in diaspora outside Palestine, those down like those at Alexandria, those in other parts who were diffused, those even in Babylon, those area, there was need for them to maintain their faith, and there came a Greek translation of this Hebrew Bible. In some cases, when I use Bible, let us not forget how I began. That Bible is a collection of books. So we are still talking about books, different books, before a kind of decision that this set of books, 22 or 24 or 7, or we already saw 5 for Samaritans and Sadducees, are the only inspired books. So now, when there was need to translate to the official language of that time, just like English, which is our official language now, they translated the book, the one that we normally call the Septuagint, from the number 70. Also from this letter of Aristeia, which said that 70 men came, they were given the Torah, and they translated the same thing. It is just a legend story to also talk about the authority and the inspiration that those who translated this Greek text of the Old Testament, which was necessitated by Jews outside. It is here that we can now insert and enter into the discussion of Christian Bible. So, but then, as at the time of Christ, it was not really clear the canon in terms of, because canon is a very important word in this hour. Canon is from Greek canon, which means read, like something that guides, something that determines the set of books that are inspired and those that are not inspired. So when at the beginning of the first century, when Christianity was coming up, there had been many translations of the Hebrew Bible. And in some cases, the Septuagint, which is this Greek translation, will be a testimony of another Hebrew Bible we do not know. The Hebrew Bible we know now, the Biblia Hebraica, the Masoretic text, the vocalized text, because all these things I'm saying now, I don't know if I'm becoming too scholastic, but I wanted to explain the thing better, but I don't know how else I will explain it. So that's also why I'm trying to write, because most of the things that might be coming up might need further understanding or further questions. So before this time, you might come and see two different testimonies, especially from the discovery of the Qumran. So as if to say, the Septuagint, which is a translation, seem to be translating an older Hebrew text, a text that was yet to be maybe re-edited again or readapted again, a text that is still growing. And in some parts, we see a Greek text that has grown or that has been readapted or has been, Italian is broken really, the immediate English words that would have been coming to my mind. Okay, for example, to mind comes the book like Esther, the book like Daniel. If you come to these two books, we have two different versions. The Hebrew one is shorter version in Hebrew. The Daniel is also a shorter version. We are very used to those who are Catholics. You know that, for example, the Monday of fifth week of Lent, we read the story of Susan. It is 13th chapter of the book of Daniel. It is in the Greek version of the Hebrew of the book of Daniel. So book of Daniel, for example, we have two. One, the Greek version, the Septuagint, the translation, which should be a translation or maybe a translation of another Hebrew text we do not have, is a larger version. If you come to like the Three in the Fire, they sang that song we normally take every Sunday as the Canticle of Sundays. And then you see the Ben and Dragon, you see the Bell and Dragon, and then you see like the story of Susanna in Daniel. The same thing in Esther. If we come, for example, in Esther, there is a bigger version, the Septuagint. So this is already the context in which the Christianity grew up. And given the fact that we know Jesus spoke Aramaic. Aramaic was the language they were speaking after the exile, after they came back at the time of Jesus. But Jesus did not write. So when after the apostles and the first Christians preached, and there was need to write. The language that was spoken in the empire then was Greek. This this will help us. Greek was the language that was spoken at that moment. Greek was not that they spoke other languages, because if you come even at the crucifixion, they say that it was written, Jesus, um, Jesus, King of the Jews, was written in Greek, in Latin, and in Hebrew. So in Palestine, that area, these are the three languages: Latin, Hebrew, and Greek. Hebrew as the language of worship, the Jews; Latin as the language of the state that is governing them; and Greek, the normal language that people spoke, like the normal English. So it's also Aramaic. But the language that was really diffused everywhere, especially with those in diaspora, which I'm talking about, is Greek. So, given that Greek was already the translation of the Hebrew text of the scriptures that people read, and the New Testament writers were writing in Greek, they were using more the Greek text, which people already know in Greek, and even though they didn't so much, they were also citing the Old Testament in Greek. They were citing them in Greek. For example, the Gospel of this Sunday, when Matthew will say, a virgin shall conceive, citing Isaiah 7:14. Matthew was citing the Greek text. So he was citing the Greek, not the Hebrew. So because of this, Christians started using the Septuagint. Clear. But then, now entering the issue of so many canons, so many communities. Now, I've talked about the Samaritans and the Sadducees, who are no longer there, who remained only with the 5 books of Moses. Now, we are still with the Pharisees. The Pharisees were those who maintained the Hebrew, or rather the Jewish religion after the destruction of the temple at 70. So the current Judaism we have is the Pharisaic one. At that time, there was already a division, there was already some strifes between the Jews and the Christians. As of the Apostle, for example, shows this very, very well. But then, as this continued, for the Jews now, since the Christians were using their Greek Bible, a Greek Bible that I've forgotten I think it should be one of the rabbis that then they were saying that God gave them Greek translation. It was a great blessing. But because the Christians are now using this text to diffuse and to grow, like they saw Christians as like heretics. Don't forget, they saw those who said that Jesus was God as heretics. So they had to block and say that the only inspired Bible is the Hebrew Bible. So that was when they had to say this. So, but by then, Christians had already been using this translated Greek text. Greek texts differently. But then, sometimes we think anachronically, anachronos, against the time, not in terms of time. At those first centuries, there was not so much the problem of how many are the books, how many are not the books. They knew the books, they were reading them sometimes separately, also, most of the time separately. The collection and the time we started seeing togetherness of books are with what we call the codexes. I think that is the English correct name. The codexes, Like we hear of Codex Vaticanus, Codex Alexandrinus, Codex Sinaiticus. There were the time you can see like different sets of books written together. Initially, you will see only the scroll of Isaiah. For example, Jesus came in Luke chapter 4, he was given the scroll of Isaiah. We hear the scroll of in Revelation, he was given the scroll. So these different books, just like maybe you have Achebes Things Fall Apart, Achebes, how do you call it? No longer at this. Achebes Arrow of God, for example, Shakespeare's let me not Romeo and Juliet, for example, that different books that were existing separately. So we started seeing from codexes you see a copy of many books put together, mainly from the Christians now, who are now using the Greek Bible also to diffuse the Christian message, seeing Christ as the fulfillment of the Old Testament and the law, of course, law and the prophets. So when the Jews came, they had to limit their Old Testament only to the ones written in the Hebrew language. This is fruit of the Pharisaic, as I was saying, the Pharisees. The Pharisees brought about this. So, but Christians were moving, and there was not so much need to define, maybe say these are the books. But I remember, even because as I was trying to write this, to prepare this, I had to read like 4 different articles. But then, I can't open this one very well now, or I can't copy it. But this, I remember when I was trying to, in one of the synods, is it synod, or of one of these Northern Africans, at the end of 4th century, they were mentioning, if I can get it now, I can copy it and show us. It should be Canon 20. Where is that canon? If I can get it now, let this not distract me. But they also followed maybe the stand of Augustine, because most of these early fathers, Jerome, for example, since he was focusing on also translating from the Hebrew, he maintained the Hebrew, which is the text, that the Hebrew Bible, even though he translated some, I think, to Judith, and if I don't mistake, I think it should be Judith or Baruch. I'm not really sure. When I didn't so much organize myself to come to prepare this like an exam, I'm only talking. So, but there are about 2 of the Greek texts he translated, but his focus was on the Hebrew. He followed with the Hebrew. But somebody like Augustine was really of the view that both the Hebrew text and the Greek text, that both of them are inspired. So, but this, if I should get that, I didn't so much pin this down, but I know that I read it in one of those. It was the Synod of Carthage around 397 or something like that, where they mentioned most of these Greek Old Testament as books that are inspired. And they talked about one Bishop Boniface, to whom this message also should be communicated to. But let's not let me not waste our time. So when these people, they did this, Christians were moving, and also the Orthodox Christians were also going. Those that were coming from Ethiopia area, if you come down Ethiopia, the Alexandrian area, the Egyptians, the Copta, they were also moving. And then we know that Christianity already moved to Rome. I'm just using, like, this is the map of, I hope this doesn't confuse you people, because I'm looking like this and you're looking. So if, like, this is the map of Palestine, this place is Egypt, this place is Ethiopia, and then from here you go up from there to Rome, from where also the Catholic Church as Roman Catholic diffused so much. So now, during those time, there were different people, different communities now are coming to the Bible. But now, at least, that Council of Carthage at the end of 4th century, the date should be 379, but around this date, they mentioned almost all these Greek translations. There are, I think I didn't say this. See, when you are not reading something. So in the Septuagint, this is important. In the Septuagint, we do not have only the Greek translations of Hebrew texts we know. There are also books that do not have, or rather that we do not know their Hebrew texts, or that were only written in Greek, like the Book of Wisdom, for example. Wisdom, let me remove this. Okay, like the Book of Wisdom, like Tobit, of course, Tobit, what do you call it? Judith. So some of these books. So like First and Second Maccabees, of course, but even this place we have first up to 4 Maccabees in the Septuagint. So Maccabees. So these are texts that are only in Greek, but they were the Old Testament that Christians read, because we see that the New Testament was written in Greek, addressed to different people. Even Paul's letter, the second letter of this Sunday, is to the Romans, written in Greek. So you cannot be writing to them maybe in Aramaic or something like that. So, and obviously they knew the Septuagint. So Christians were using the Septuagint. This continued for a very long time. There was not so much need, except maybe some of the times that they had to talk about this, like those Northern African synods, most of them went with this. But somebody like Jerome, who translated the Hebrew, was of the view, among just as some other fathers of the church, but Jerome was important, was of the view of the Hebrew text as the inspired, then the other Greek Old Testament, which we do not have their Hebrew, he saw them as good for life, for inspiration. So now we came to early modern period when the issue started becoming interesting for Christian denominations. Now to the main question. I hope people can still follow this. But I don't want to annoy people, because my problem is always the audience. I don't know if, but let me continue. So now, coming to that time, there were, especially the Council of Florence. It should be in the middle of 15th century, around 14 something. I don't remember the exact date. They also rectified and said these are the books, as we have always read it, that they are the books, that same books we find mentioned here already in the Synod of Carthage. And even the one before it of Hippo. So this also the view shared by somebody like Augustine. So now, after this thing happened, there came the schisma, the Luther we know of. So when Luther came, at least I read it in about 3 of the articles I read as I'm preparing this. So I'm not trying to invent anything, or I'm not saying because I'm a Catholic. So Luther, to remove especially the issue of purgatory, which he do not like, he had to remove the Maccabees, because Maccabees was one of the of the foundations of also the doctrine about purgatory. And then Luther also, they said he does not see as inspired books like Hebrews, I think Jude, the New Testament, Jude, and which other one? I can't. There are four. I think that's Second Peter or something like that. But I can't really. I didn't revise these things. So, but there are two other books that Luther didn't regard as being inspired in the New Testament. So, mainly from this Protestant, we are the ones that call them Protestant. There was this separation in the Old Testament. Old Testament now, they went only for the Hebrew Bible, which was also call it the stand of Jerome, because they also cite Jerome as authority. But even though Jerome did not remove the books that Luther was removing in the New Testament. So in the Christian area, we have like, maybe we'll say Catholics, we have Protestants, we have even Orthodox. So sorry, now I don't need to, let me remove these Christians because it doesn't, I've already, so I'm talking about communities. What did I do? Did I remove or did I? Okay, cancel. Okay, yeah, okay, now, what am I doing? I forgot, sorry. Catholics, sorry. So Catholics, Protestants. So for Catholics, they consider as inspired most, not all, of this Septuagint. For example, the second and third Ezra, they are not inspired. They are apocryphal books for Catholics. Second and third Maccabees, they are apocryphal for Catholics. But for Catholics, in the whole, they have 46 books of the Old Testament. Most of them are from the Septuagint. Okay? When I write L, is representing Septuagint. Then, because this is where the problem comes. And then from Protestants, they have 39 following strictly the Hebrew Bible. They followed the Hebrew Bible. They followed the Hebrew, of course, Pharisaic. When I say Pharisaic, it's not in a sense of something pejorative, no. In terms of Pharisaic tradition. So, and then the Orthodox, most of them have 51 books. So some of the books that Catholics didn't also take as inspired, for most of the Orthodox, especially maybe even Ethiopian church, there's this exact Ethiopian, I read it in one of the articles, they have in the whole 81 books of the Bible. So these different communities approaching the different books that came, especially up to the time of Christ, before Christ, in the Old Testament, and at the time of Christ, after the time of Christ, with the time of the apostolic era, there are different approaches. So the Protestants now, they followed the Pharisees, which I talked about. Where did I talk about the Pharisees? That the number 3 of the people that said these are the books that are inspired. The first people that talked at that time were the Samaritans and the Sadducees. They said 5. For the Pharisees, we have on the whole, if we count it the way we are counting, There are 39. But if we count it in the way they themselves were counting, there are 24, because the minor prophets are counted together. First and second Samuel are counted together. First and second Kings are counted together. So, but for us, the Protestants, there are 39 books. The exact number that Protestants have is the exact number that the Pharisees, the Jews, actual Jews now have. But now, if you come to the Catholics, which maintained that long tradition, but not all the books in the Septuagint are canonical for the Catholics. The Orthodox, there are the Copta, the Coptic people from Egypt, the Ethiopian church also. They have even more. They opened up more and have more books. Even in New Testament, forgetting the exact, sorry that I'm not saying things that are very, very precise, but I didn't have time to come to revise most of these things because I only wanted to respond to the question, how come there are these and which are these books? So, don't forget. So the Orthodox, there are some other people that even regarded the books of Clement as part of the New Testament. So if you are reading most of those articles, there are even those who are placing the book of wisdom as part of New Testament, those who are removing Hebrews, those who are removing Revelations and all those things. But following the Carthage Synod of 397, which was again reaffirmed in Florence, 14 AD, 14 something AD, 15th century, and then in a very definitive manner, because Luther said no to the Greek text, because Luther said no, maybe this might be the better way to talk about the Council of Trent and the book, because most people are only saying that Trent formed the canon. No. Because Luther said no, because of Luther, in response to Luther, because of Luther, who remained, with the Old OTs, Old Testament of the Jews, Council of Trent came and then proclaimed as dogma these 46 books that we find in the Council of Trent. So saying that if someone says no, this one becomes now definitive for every Catholic. We are not touching the books as we have always read it. So now, coming to the two Bibles I presented. So many people now, if you enter into the translations, those who are translating Bible. So in order not to, there are those who are not also very, very strict about all these. They see that these books that we are inspired by God, they lead us to encounter God. So, but most translators, they work together. Most of these texts that are translated by interdenominational people. So this is about the canon, the number of books. I hope that it is clear. If there are many articles, so you can also try to read and what do you call it, approfondire in English now. Approfondire is to like get deeper into it. So just maybe a summary way of saying something again. Why a Catholic Bible and a non-Catholic Bible? Because the Catholic Bible now, if you pick up that Ignatius Catholic Study Bible, you will discover that his comments, especially since it was also edited by one person, as it were, there were different other experts in every other book, but you see Scott Hahn running through it. So the citations, the references, it was read like seeing the whole Bible as together. Now reading seeing the way this one is connected to this, the way this one is connected to this, all those 46 books of the Old Testament. And I didn't even mention this, you see, the issue of talking like this. So 27 of New Testament for the Catholics, 27 for Catholics. For Protestants, we have the same number of um, of New Testament. We don't have problem with New Testament for Catholics and Protestants. But some Orthodox add, maybe some will be seeing the book of Clement, some are even seeing the book of Barnabas somehow, or the what do you call it, the Pastore of it was this, but that one is not. There are some of the Orthodox that also left after Chalcedon. But now, coming back to what I was talking about the Catholic, because the real question was that there are Protestant Bible that also contain the same books of the Catholic Bible. They are containing them as apocryphal books. If you read them, their commentaries, for example, if you are reading like maybe Genesis, the person who is writing Genesis might just be citing other 39 books as inspired. He may say that there is this view in the apocryphal book, seeing the other ones almost like not at the same level, but most of them contain them, not all of them. Not all the Protestant Bible contain the other apocryphal books, the ones that they call apocrypha, those that are deuterocanonical for Catholics. So let me end the class now. I know it has become very difficult for most of us. Thank you, and meet you in the next catechism class. Of course, everything is to help us to reading the Bible. God bless you.